My girlfriend Elsbeth has been kidnapped. She's been taken by a band of Albanian mobsters who intend to sell her off to some place she'll never be found again. I know this for a fact. You might be wondering how I know this. Not 10 minutes ago, she texted me a single word: pubapple. And you might be thinking that's not a real word, and you'd be absolutely correct. But what you don't know is that Elsbeth was trying to say pineapple. Pineapple was our safe word. We knew to say it to each other if something was wrong. And so here I am on a Friday night, alone in my parents' basement, staring down at a green bubble text that says, pubapple. What am I to make of that other than the following conclusions? 1, something's gone horribly, horribly wrong with Elsbeth. And 2, in a moment of crisis, perhaps as she was being dragged away by some burly perpetrator, she tried desperately to reach me but was so caught up in the crisis that 3, her dainty fingers could not help but to mistype the one word that she and I both knew to mean danger and or problem. So while I don't know exactly what has gone wrong, I know something is most definitely wrong, and I just want you to tell me I'm not crazy. Best case scenario, she's stranded out in the wilderness somewhere. Worst case, she's in the back of a white van, wrists zip-tied behind her back and a not-so-nice smelling black sack over her head. So the range of terrible possibilities is wide. That's why we have to act now if we're going to save her. Yes, technically Elsbeth did break up with me 3 months ago. So yes, technically she is my ex-girlfriend, but that doesn't really change the situation. I would think her parents, of all people, would show a little concern. Or let me in the house, perhaps. No, I don't think I'm being delusional. Okay, I'm being proactive. If Elsbeth's been kidnapped, we have less than 23 hours to find her before our odds of seeing her again plummet dramatically. Yes, of course I tried calling her and texting her several times, many dozens of several times, to no response. You can see how that is suspicious. And no, you're not the first people I went to. I first went to Jen and Julie, her best friends. I shared the intel with them. I told them about the text and the general suspicious quality of it and the working theory that Elsbeth's been kidnapped, and they told me I was being creepy and should leave her alone. They said she's on a study abroad trip in Wales and that I had no business stalking her or indulging in paranoid delusions or hero fantasies on her behalf. They closed the door in my face, which thankfully you guys have not done yet. Allow me to say thank you. Then I went to the police. I told them I was totally and completely confident my girlfriend Elsbeth had been kidnapped. An investigator sat me down in the interrogation room and asked me when was my last conversation with her. And I said 3 months ago. And the investigator said, what did you guys talk about? And I said, well, she was breaking up with me, and that's when the conversation became less productive. He saw me to the door and closed it in my face. So this is what brings me here. Your daughter, my girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, has been kidnapped, and we have only so much time to save her, and if we do nothing, she will be gone forever. Elsbeth always said I didn't do enough for her, that I needed to grow up and really put the relationship first. And to that I say, better late than never. With the heavy wood door shut in my face, it became clear to me I had to take matters into my own hands. I dashed home and put on all black clothes. I knew from the movies the first step was to retrace her footsteps. I did 30 push-ups and 20 jumping jacks. I asked Mom if I could borrow her car, and she said for what, and I did not even begin to try to explain. I had learned my lesson on that front. I told her I'm going to Tony's house, which was not technically a lie. I did, in fact, drive to Tony's house, where I smoked a joint to take the edge off and waited for nightfall. Then, when the streetlights started flickering on, I just so happened to drive back to Elsbeth's parents' house. It was fully dark when I arrived, which was really not great because I knew at this point we had only like 13 to 16 hours to save her. I waited there, parked a block down from their front stoop, unsure of what to do next. But sometimes the universe maps the way for you, I guess, because right as the clock struck 6:44 and 27 seconds, Mr. and Mrs. exited their home dressed in tuxedo and ball gown, their bi-monthly dinner date attire probably, and got in their Honda Odyssey and drove off. My next actions were automatic. I did not have to think. I was connected to my somatic self. I got out of Mom's car and pulled the black balaclava over my head. I jogged down the block to the front door on the balls of my feet to minimize any sound. I wondered if there were maybe, possibly, any nosy neighbors watching me. Then I put this thought out of my mind. It was unhelpful. I tried the door, but it was locked, so I swung around to the side, hopped the fence, and tried the back door. But the back door was locked, too. So what then but to climb the drain pipe that's right there and let myself in through Elsbeth's bedroom window? It must have looked pretty suspicious to any and all neighbors watching, what with me dressed totally in black, arms and legs wrapped tight around Elsbeth's parents' rickety drainpipe, scooching and pulling my way up to a window that, dear God, I hope is not locked. Plus, it was nighttime. Then I was at Elsbeth's window, and by a stroke of good luck, I was able to shatter the glass with the sharpest point of my elbow when it was, by a stroke of bad luck, locked. So now I stood inside the place, inside her bedroom, and the memories came flooding back. Ouch. Right there on her half-made bed was where we first kissed. Still just kids. No idea of the world. We used to watch old movies and not really pay attention to them while we cut pictures out of magazines to make collages and eat chocolate-covered whatevers. We used to... but you see, I had to put these thoughts out of my mind. They were unhelpful. They did not contribute productively to the task at hand. I had to focus. I knew that here in her bedroom had to be at least one clue as to where she might be, where she might have been when she texted me her emergency cry for help. I started with the little corkboard above her makeup/writing desk, and right there, at the center of it all, is where I saw it. A square of thick beige cardstock. An invitation to a party for the end of the world. That's what it said, in embossed copperplate text. I read the whole thing and organized the relevant facts. Date, today. Start time, 5 p.m., just 30 minutes before I received Elsbeth's text, pube apple. Location, the Aquarius yacht, departing from the North Pier. Hosted by Lorenzo. A party on a boat in the middle of the lake, hosted by a man with a strange name. And when you have nothing to go off, you take what you can get. I snatched the thing off the corkboard and climbed back out the window, and it wasn't till I was halfway back down the drainpipe that I realized I could have just left through the front door. Then, out front of the house again, I realized Mom's car and license plate were totally in view of the house ring camera the whole time, and I almost had a meltdown right there in the yellow pool of street lamplight I was standing in. But then I remembered the ticking of the clock on Elsbeth's life, and that this was no time to panic, so I put the unhelpful thought out of my mind and got in the car like a big boy. I turned the car on. I routed myself to the address on the cardstock. I started driving. I drove fast. I zipped through several stop signs without stopping. I thought of Elsbeth watching me do this. I thought about what she might think and feel about me. I weaved through and around cars on the highway. I realized I was still wearing the balaclava. I realized I must have looked out of place in Mom's Honda HR-V. I put the thought out of my mind. I parked in a no parking zone. No time, no time. I rushed to the office, which was closed, of course, because it was night. But again, what are you going to let stupid little inconveniences get in the way of saving Elsbeth's life? No. No, you are not. What was I to do but to borrow one of the boats out front? Now, keep in mind, I had never driven, let alone started, a speedboat, but from the shore I could see the distant light of what must have been a cruise ship or yacht, and I just had a feeling. I had to get after it. So I hustled down to the pier. I Googled how to hotwire a speedboat. It took a few minutes to locate the correct make and model of the vessel so I could get the right instructions online. Then I followed the steps and found it to be more intuitive than you'd expect. The thing screamed into ignition and I pulled out onto the water and started in the direction of the ship way out there. Moment to moment is really not the worst way to live, I thought to myself. Here I was, way out on the lake, wind whipping through my hair, crashing up and down over waves like a pirate of old. The old me never would have done this. But for Elsbeth, anything. The ship was far larger than it appeared from the shore. I was rapidly approaching the back of it, and had to disembark and embark, respectively. I tried to Google how to stop a speedboat, but no time. So I tried to Google how to evacuate a speedboat without it stopping, but as I was typing, the wind picked up and ripped my phone from my hands, and it vanished into the waves. So I took a deep breath and leapt from the small boat just as it reached the back of the bigger boat. My cold and clammy palms barely made contact with the rail. But I pulled myself up, and there I was, standing on the yacht, wondering what in the hell I was to do next. I had the balaclava on still. There was classical music coming from the floor above. I crept along the bottom deck, looking for a staircase up. And just as I turned the corner, here suddenly was a man in a tuxedo holding a silver platter of champagne flutes up to his side with a hand in a white glove. He must have been shocked to see me there in a black mask and all, because he sucked in a mouthful of air with such force I thought he might choke on it. It was right after this single terse breath that I, still without thinking, struck him at the very center of his throat, with my fingers held tight together and straight out like a blade. A single forward motion to the poor waiter's esophagus area, and he fell to the ground, unconscious or dead. I removed his garments and put on each of the pieces of his suit, and the whole get-up was a little big on me, but now at least I looked the part. I picked up the empty tray but not the shattered flutes, and I crossed the immaculate main floor of the lobby and up the spiral staircase to find what else but a great old-fashioned party in full swing. A room full of people in tuxedos and ball gowns seated at tables with red placemats and white wine. A big band on a stage over there. I just stood totally still for a long moment, waiting for someone to notice me. Then a sharp-smelling man in a suit noticed me and said, "What are you doing just standing there with an empty tray? Get back in the kitchen. Let's go." He was short and French-looking and wore a silver name tag that read, Marquis. I closed my mouth and started in the direction of what must have been the kitchen, my pant legs dragging on the carpet floor. I was swimming in the jacket itself. I pushed through double doors into an industrial kitchen where I was loaded with flutes of champagne and sent back out to the main floor to get rid of them. At least 20 round tables of old, wealthy people wreathed in black. I went around offering drinks and they all took them. No one looked me in the eye. Then there was a heavy tap, tap, tap on the microphone, and out came some gentleman with a seahorse pin on his lapel who looked like he was about to start a speech. He started his speech. He said, "Thank you everyone for coming out to our little shindig. Tonight we'll be sharing a few key updates on the initiative." He said initiative with 5 syllables. The whole crowd clapped. Seahorse Man said, "Let's go ahead and bring out the new recruits." And a line of young people emerged from the left side curtains until they all stood on stage. The people at the tables clapped in their faces. The kids on stage were young. It looked like a class photo, except no one was smiling. And right there in the middle of them, I saw her. Her face holding back tears. Elsbeth. 150,000% she was not in Wales for a study abroad trip. Of that I was certain. Without thinking, because remember, I was living moment to moment at this point, fully in touch with my somatic, subconscious self, I stepped toward her, to rescue her, I guess. The very next second, I tripped on one of the waiter's long pant legs and fell to the ground hard, spilling and shattering champagne flutes all about. Everyone in the room was looking at me. I tried to ignore this by keeping my gaze locked on Elsbeth, her eyes shimmering with wet. Was that relief in her face? I was unsure. Seahorse Man continued. "These brave initiates have joined our movement willingly and will now be entering their first phase of training," he said, "which of course involves taking decisive action against the enemy." Everyone clapped at this. I think I saw Elsbeth stiffen or shudder. "As we speak," Seahorse Man said, "they are gathering in force and number. The facility is operating at full capacity, and our time is running out. Without brave young recruits like these folks here, we will lose this war, I'm afraid." Nobody clapped at this. "First," he said, "these initiates will be given over to our head of training." He gestured to a mean-looking man off stage right, dressed in the full Navy uniform of a custodial technician. He wore a silver name tag with no name on it. "From there," the Seahorse Man went on, "they will be given their first assignments, which will include, of course, taking radical forward action towards eliminating the facility and its benefactors. Let's hear it again for these brave young folks who've chosen willingly to give their lives to the mission." And everyone clapped. Then the line of young people, including Elsbeth, was ushered off stage right in the direction of the custodian, who led them back into the kitchen. I followed them. Marquis tried to stop me in my tracks, saying, "Table 3 over there needs a refill on the communal bowl of salad." But I had no time, so I said to him, no time, and brushed right past him into the kitchen, where I saw Elsbeth and the rest of these poor recruits being ushered towards a back door that led to who knows where. I sprinted across the kitchen to Elsbeth, who stood near the back of the line. I grabbed her arm and pulled her under a table, praying the custodian was not looking. Elsbeth couldn't believe what was happening. I can only imagine the mix of chemicals coursing through her nervous system. "Jasper, thank God you're here," she said. "How did you find me?" I said, "I broke into your room." This did not clear things up for her. I said, "I broke in and found the cardstock invitation for whatever the fuck this thing is. Elsbeth, what have you gotten yourself into?" She said, "I don't know, but you need to get us out of here." And I said, "Yeah, that's kind of the whole prerogative. I've come to save you." And it felt good to say this sentence, but we couldn't bask in the moment for much longer because there was no time. We climbed out from under the steel table and tiptoed out the double doors of the kitchen. Then we continued tiptoeing across the ballroom so as not to be spotted. But of course, we were spotted by the man who gave the speech, the man with the seahorse pin, the man I could only assume was Lorenzo, who was still mic'd up when he said, "And where do you two think you're going?" Now, I've always had a hard time lying under pressure, so I said, "We're leaving. This whole charade is not for us." And Seahorse Man said, "That is a shame. We were excited to have you join our cause. Bear in mind, however, you are both already well past the critical threshold, the point of no return, as it were." And neither of us took the time to process what he could possibly mean by this, because we just started running. I took Elsbeth's hand and she took mine, and we fled. Out the ballroom, down the steps. We could hear them pursuing us. Heavy footsteps of heavy men. We made it down the main set of stairs all the way to the end of the anteroom, where standing in the way were two thuggish-looking dudes in tuxedos. Without a thought, I roundhoused one of them, taking him to the floor, which I didn't know I knew how to do. The other lunged for Elsbeth and got her by the wrist, and she let out a scream that must have made her throat bleed, but that also unlocked a whole new layer of adrenaline within an ancient part of my brainstem, and I leapt from my position onto the thug, as though my muscles were all of a sudden spring-loaded with whatever they load springs with. My blows fell upon his face like boulders until he lay there limp, and I took Elsbeth's hand again. I led her to the speedboat waiting for us at the edge of the yacht's bottom deck, just where I left it. I held her hand as she got in. And here we are, speeding away from the big yacht in the middle of the water at night, over and across impossible waves towards shore. Elsbeth puts her head on my shoulder. She's still holding my hand. I tell her I'll always be there for her. She can't hear me over the sound of the waves.